Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, different parts of the world. Welcome to our weekly cultural storytelling event when we share inspiring stories about food, travel, history, and more importantly, lifestyle of people around the world for the people around the world. It's free for anyone from any background. Today, we have a lot of specials for a lot of reasons, thanks to a lovely couple from Canada. It is our first Pacific time friendly event. Normally it happens on 1 p.m. GMT, our UK afternoon time, but it's our first UK later afternoon time, so we can have speakers from West Coast of Canada. Our main heroine today, she is 206 years old from Germany. Unfortunately, for reasons we understand, she's not able to be with us in person. However, we have the pleasure to invite her biographers, Dr. Harald and his wife Sharon, to represent her. So, how does a couple in Canada, almost 4,000 miles away from Germany, and with a distance of 4,000 miles and a distance of time as well, almost 200 years apart from each other. So today, the story is about Josephine Lang, the German composer, as well as about the couple who wrote her story and let her name be known and let her music be known to all of us. So with a huge pleasure, I would like to put Dr. Harald and his wife Sharon into the spotlight. So here we go.
Thank you so much, Minji. And I really want to thank you for inviting us to be part of this amazing series that you have created. Congratulations to you. And thank you also for changing the time for us and for later West Coast speakers. We would have done this at 5 a.m., but we're much happier to be doing it at 9 o'clock our time. So, welcome, everybody. In 2001, we participated in a conference in Germany. After our presentation on Josephine Lang, one of the conference delegates asked us how we as Canadians came to be working on a German woman song composer. We gave a short answer, but this is something you might be wondering about too. So we're going to start by going into some detail about it. So first of all, we are both of German descent, and we both learned the language as children. Which typically involves one voice plus. Now, the story of how we got into Josephine Lang specifically is an interesting one. So in the 1990s, I was known for my research on German songs, and I was invited in 1993 to participate in a conference in the following year on women composers. We're going to have our first quiz question now.
So, oops. Okay, my clicker isn't working. All right, just a minute. I'm going to have to try this. There we go. So Minji, will you set up the first quiz question so people can actually answer it, please?
So I set up the third question. So this one, I'm afraid for people who would like to answer the quiz question, what you can do is to put in the chat box how many women composed and published music in the 19th century. So feel free to use the chat box to write down your answers, A, B, C, or D. Okay, I am going to let you know what's the answer from the audience. A, and C come quite frequently. So A, C, and dog. But however, there's also somebody who wrote B for boy. So technically, you've got all these answers.
Okay.
So the correct answer is actually hundreds. There are hundreds of women composers in the 19th century. Back in 1993, the two of us would probably have answered A, fewer than 10. So I knew a lot about German songs in general, but I knew nothing about women composers of song. So I was on study leave in 1993, and we went to Germany for 6 months. My main project was researching a book on Robert Schumann, but I decided I'd better get up to speed on women composers so that I'd be prepared for the conference.
We headed to the local music library in Bonn, where we were based, and asked a wonderful librarian to help us find some songs by women composers. This is Brigitte Berenbruch. She became a close friend, and we dedicated our book to her. Among the sources she dug out for us was an anthology of songs by German women composers. We had access to a piano, so we worked through the songs in that anthology. The volume included 3 songs by Josephine Lang, a composer of whom we had never heard, and these stood out for us because of their beautiful melodies and interesting piano parts. Here's one of the songs from that book, and I've given you both the German and the English so you can follow along.
Nur den Abschied schnell genommen, nicht gezaudert, nicht geklagt, schneller als die Tränen kommen, losgerissen und verzagt, losgerissen und verzagt. Aus den Armen losgewunden, wie dies in der Brust auch brennt, was im Leben sich gefunden, wird im Leben auch getrennt, wird im Leben auch getrennt. Sollst du tragen, musst du tragen, nur mit festem Sinn, deine Seufzer, deine Klagen wehen in die Lüfte hin, deine Seufzer, deine Klagen wehen in die Lüfte hin. Soll der Schmerz dich nicht bezwingen, so bezwinge du den Schmerz und verwelkte Blüten schlingen, frisch sich um dein wundes Herz, frisch sich um dein wundes Herz.
The other songs by Lang in that anthology were wonderful too, so I decided to focus on her for my conference paper. Of course, I needed to see more of her music. After a lot of research and letter writing, we found out that her musical manuscripts were stored at the Württemberg State Library in Stuttgart, and we went there to have a look. The staff brought us several boxes of uncatalogued manuscripts. When we saw how much material there was and how little work had been done on it, we realized that this was going to lead to more than one conference paper. There was definitely a book in there, and it was a project that could most efficiently be completed by both of us together.
We started slowly by making a list of the titles represented by each manuscript. This alone took a few years. We were able to work at the library just a couple of weeks each year. We had lots of other projects on the go, and of course, we were unable to be in Germany all the time. Another thing that slowed us down was Lang's handwriting. I'm not referring to messiness, although it often is messy. Lang wrote both letters and music when she was sick in bed, so you can imagine how they turned out. What slowed us down was the German 19th century script. We could read the printed script, although that too can be a little tricky sometimes. Notice the similarity between an F and an S. But the German handwriting from the 19th century was completely different, and we had no idea what to do with that. Here's one of Lang's letters, from which we have extracted a single word for you to try your hand at. So have a look at this and choose the correct answer. What is the correct transcription of this word? And we didn't get it made into a quiz, so you'll just have to jot your answers into the chat. Of course, if you know German, you have an advantage because only one of those 4 options is a real word. So it looks like most of you have actually got it right. It's C, hochverehrter, highly honored. Congratulations on that one.
My dad learned this script as a child, so he gave us some lessons. It took 2 years for us to become fluent, but eventually we were able to read and transcribe this script without noticing how different it is. This skill was extremely important as we started to research Lang's life as well as her music. The problem of messiness didn't go away, but at least we could recognize the words. The conference that got us going on investigating Lang actually never took place. I ended up organizing a conference myself in 1996. To our surprise, we got a letter from the Brahms scholar Imogen Fellinger, who turned out to be Josephine Lang's last living descendant, her great-great-granddaughter. She attended the conference in Victoria, and so we got to meet her. And here she is. The woman beside her is the Clara Schumann scholar, Nancy Reich. It was so much fun for us to meet and exchange ideas with other people doing research on women composers.
Our research continued over the next several years. We found so many amazing documents in the archives we visited. One of these was a sketch of Josephine Lang's garden. 2 trees, number 10 and number 14, caught our attention. 2 trees labeled Apfelrenette von Kanada. We decided that these 2 trees indicated that 2 Canadians were destined to become Josephine Lang's biographers.
We'll present a very brief summary of Lang's life now. If you want more detail, you can read about it in our book. Since Explore Culture is usually about travel, we'll give this summary a travel slant.
So Josephine Lang was born in Munich in 1815 and died in Tübingen in 1880. In Munich, she received the minimal musical education that was granted to her, with a variety of teachers, including her mother and Felix Mendelssohn when he was visiting Munich. During the 1830s, she experienced the first flowering of her compositional career in the form of intense productivity and a significant amount of publication.
Many composers traveled extensively, seeking musical stimulation and creating opportunities for people to hear their music. Lang did not have much luck in that department. Her godfather suggested that she should go to Weimar to study with Johann Nepomuk Hummel, a composer and pianist. But that never happened. Mendelssohn recommended a trip to Berlin to study with his sister, Fanny Hensel. But that too didn't happen. In 1839, everything was in place for Lang to go to stay with her aunt in Vienna, the city where so many famous composers had lived and where there was such a rich music scene. At the very last moment, that trip too was aborted.
So did she actually get to go anywhere? Well, not far. She was often in nearby Augsburg, where she met the pianist and composer Stefan Heller, who was incredibly helpful to her professionally. She also traveled to Salzburg, where she had the thrill of meeting Mozart's widow. And she was often in the Kreuz-Tegernsee region just south of Munich, because her godfather had a summer house in Tegernsee. It was there that Lang met the man who was to change her life.
In 1840, she became seriously ill and was sent to recover at a spa in Kreuz. There she met the law professor and poet Christian Reinhold Köstlin. This picture of their first meeting was painted for me by Elizabeth Giroux, one of my students. She did this in thanks for my having supervised her in a project on Lang. That's one of the nicest things any student ever did for me. We love this painting. So Lang and Köstlin fell in love. You can see it starting to happen in this painting. And they were married in 1842. There was lots of drama in the initial stages of that relationship, but it all worked out in the end. During their courtship and engagement, she set many of Köstlin's poems to music. These are some of her finest and now most frequently performed songs.
Lang got to enjoy one more journey before settling down to married life, her honeymoon on the Rhine. Her newly minted husband wrote a poem during their honeymoon that she set to music. It's not a song that one often hears, so here is our recording of it.
Ein Vögelein fliegt übern Rhein und wiegt die Flügel im Sonnenschein und wiegt die Flügel im Sonnenschein. Sie dreben Hügel und grüne Flut, sie dreben Hügel, grüne Flut, wie wohl das tut. So hoch erhoben im Morgen hoch beim Vögelein droben, will ich auch, will ich auch. So hoch erhoben im Morgen hoch beim Vögelein droben, will ich auch. So hoch erhoben im Morgen hoch beim Vögelein droben, will ich,
It's beautiful.
Thank you. So, Lang and her husband initially lived in Stuttgart, then moved to the small town of Tübingen, where he taught at the university. And that's a really beautiful town. After her marriage, Lang's productivity as a composer took a dive, not surprisingly, because she had 6 children. Her husband died in 1856, and she then returned to composing and teaching so as to be able to support her family. Now, we'd like to show you a photo of her family. We can't share it with you on the screen because this will be on YouTube and there are copyright reasons why we can't share this. But I will hold it up.
Oh, just a minute. I'm having some trouble. I'm going to have to get out of this.
We're just stopping the share here. Okay, so I will hold this up and I hope you can see that photo there. That's Lang and her children. This is from about 1859.
So we'll go back to the PowerPoint now. In her endeavors to re-establish herself as a publishing professional composer, Lang was assisted by numerous prominent colleagues, notably Ferdinand Hiller, a conductor and composer whom she had met in Munich in her youth. He did her a huge favor by writing a biography of her. It first appeared in a newspaper in Cologne, and then in a volume of essays. This essay was widely read and made her quite famous. In addition to losing her husband after only 14 years of marriage, she also lost 3 of her sons. Her 2 daughters and her youngest son married and moved away, so her final years were rather lonely. She kept composing music to the end of her life.
Lang died in 1880 at the age of 65. She's buried in the city cemetery in Tübingen. We have visited her grave many times. In fact, we have a cast of the medallion from the grave hanging in our house. Somebody from Berlin contacted us and said, I have this plaster cast of Josephine Lang. Do you want it? And we said, yes. So once when we were in Germany, he sent it to us in a pizza box, carefully wrapped. So it occupies pride of place in our house. Lang's children did their best to preserve their mother's musical legacy. In spite of their efforts, she was more or less forgotten after her death. And it was only in the late 20th century that musicologists and performers began to take an interest in her music again.
Okay, now we're on part 3. So what happens when you're researching a composer's life and music? Some of the early work on Lang depended too much on a biography written by her youngest son shortly after her death. We wanted our work to be based as much as possible on first-hand information, so we spent a lot of time poring over documents in numerous archives. Which brings us to another quiz question for you. This time, we are only going to tell you the correct answer at the end of this part of our presentation. So I think this time, Minji, you do have a real Zoom poll, right? Yes, okay, great.
Are you able to see it now?
Yes.
So the audience, feel free to vote the question. And how many minutes should I give people? 1 minute?
Oh, I think a minute is lots, yeah.
Minute. So people are slowly giving their answers. It's a difficult one.
It is. I know all this German. The English translations of the German things are in the brackets.
It's yes. So far, half of us have voted, and again, all sorts of answers are being ticked. Very soon, I'll wait for another 30 seconds. Then I will share the answer from people, not necessarily the correct answer. I will share the answer from people. So come on, dear group members in the on the audience seat, feel free. Don't worry if you're wrong, because probably none of us will get it 100% right. That's the point of being here today, to learn something new. I am going to, end the poll and share the answer with everybody. So far, the highest rated answer is option number 2, firefighter museum of Winnenden. We don't know what's the correct answer. We will wait until you review over time. So
Yes.
Yes, you'll know very soon.
Okay, so the two most important research sites for us were the Stuttgart Library, we showed you earlier, and the German Literature Archive in Marbach, Germany. About a half an hour north of Stuttgart by train, so we could get from one to the other fairly easily. Stuttgart has the bulk of Lang's musical manuscript, and Marbach holds the bulk of her husband's literary manuscripts and family letters. Both of these types of sources were incredibly important to our research.
Lang's musical manuscripts are fascinating. She has title pages that she created herself for her manuscript booklets, and they're covered with writings and drawings. And you can imagine deciphering and transcribing one title page could take many, many hours. Her song manuscripts themselves are also sometimes illustrated, and they often contain details about the circumstances surrounding the composition of a given piece. So those were especially helpful in our research. Many researchers have stories about finding something in an archive that moved them to tears, and we had those experiences too. One such moment occurred in Malbach when we found letters from two of Lang's young sons to their father. Lang's husband did not die suddenly in 1856. He had been ill for years and had to give up his university job because he could no longer speak. And that, of course, had grave financial consequences for the family. So these letters from the boys gave us a poignant insight into what Lang's husband's illness meant for the family. So one of the letters is shown here. The little boy drew his own lines, and then he even made an envelope and drew the requisite wax seal on it. But it was the letter from the older boy that really got to us. He begins, "I wish you a happy new year, and especially a new throat, just like mine is." And later on he writes, "And when you have a new throat, just like mine, I wish that you would still live for a really, really long time." And he concludes with one more wish, that you could go to the college again and earn money. So, very sad. It still gets us today.
Our Lang research also took us to England, specifically to Oxford. The Bodleian Library at Oxford holds the letter collection of Felix Mendelssohn. Now, in order to be able to get a reader card to do research at the Bodleian, you have to swear an oath not to kindle any open flame in the library. We swore the oath in this beautiful building and then headed off to the music division to look at Felix Mendelssohn's letters.
And you'll be happy to know that we took this oath very seriously. We didn't kindle any fires.
Mendelssohn's letters are mounted on pages in the famous green books. Now, I couldn't find a photo of the real green books, so I faked one for this PowerPoint using green books we had around the house. In working through the green books, we learned that it's not enough to just read the letters that Josephine Lang or her husband had written to Mendelssohn. You also have to read the letters from people who knew Lang. And you sometimes have to wade through a huge number of such letters before you find a reference to Josephine Lang. But when you finally do discover something, it's worth all the trouble. At the Bodleian, we also found a little piece that Lang had written for one of Mendelssohn's grandchildren. We love the highly decorated manuscript paper that composers in the 19th century used when they were copying out their compositions as gifts for people.
Köln, or Cologne, was another important source of letters. This was where Lang's letters to Ferdinand Hiller were to be found. Hiller glued all of his correspondence into big black books, which were held in the city archive of Cologne. Now, you may have noticed my use of the past tense in the last two sentences. That was deliberate. We're actually not sure if these letters still exist because the City Archive of Cologne collapsed in 2009, 2 years after our book came out. Work on a new subway system had undermined and weakened its structure. And so many research projects and PhD dissertations were derailed by this disaster. The Hilla letters may well have ended up like this. So many things were totally damaged and destroyed. In the weeks after the collapse, we browsed through our book and were stunned to discover just how much of the information in the last few chapters had come from the Hilla letters. We are so grateful that we were able to complete our research there before the collapse. Now, I have to mention that nobody was in the building when it crumbled. Archive staff noticed cracks appearing in the walls and quickly made everyone leave. 2 people in a neighboring building, however, were pulled into the rubble when the collapse took place and sadly died. But everyone in the archive itself made it out in time.
Now we'll take you back to southwestern Germany to the town of Tübingen. We've already shown you Lang's grave in the city cemetery, but there are more Lang sites in Tübingen. The university archives holds letters, music scores with her handwritten dedications, and the poetry manuscripts of one of Lang's close friends. It was lovely working in the old wood-paneled reading room of this library.
Lang's house in Tübingen is still standing. In the 19th century, it was called the Villa Köstlin, and it is indeed a very imposing house. In 2005, 125 years after Lang's death, we were asked to do a lecture recital on Josephine Lang in this house. That was an amazing experience, performing Lang's songs in the place where she spent most of her life and where many of her songs were written. The house is now a university building, and turning it into a concert space was quite a challenge. A giant photocopier had to be moved out, a piano had to be moved in, and most of the audience had to sit on cushions on the stairs because there was hardly any room for chairs. But challenges or no, it was a memorable event for us.
By 2005, the garden with its 2 Canadian apple trees was, alas, long gone and had been transformed into a parking lot. But there was still a fair bit of greenery around the house, and the front stoop was very pretty. Later on, however, the area around the house was stripped of all vegetation. It really looks like a university building now and not a family home. One thing that had always bothered us was the fact that there was no acknowledgement that this was the house of Josephine Lang. After our concert, we wrote to the mayor of Tübingen asking if a plaque could be mounted on the house. We were told that so many famous people lived in Tübingen that it was simply impossible to put a plaque on all of their houses. But in 2016, Tübingen finally did put up a plaque, and the mayor held a little speech.
So we have 2 final stops in Germany, Ludwigsburg and Winnenden, both of which are near Stuttgart and Marbach. As we mentioned, 3 of Lang's sons predeceased her. The story of the eldest is particularly tragic. He took his father's early death very hard and had a breakdown. His mental health deteriorated so that it became impossible for him to live at home. He had to be sent to the asylum in Winnenden. He died there in 1867. Lang wrote to a friend about her son being the sole victim of the great fire disaster at Winnenthal. we decided we need to find out about this great fire, and we wrote to the Firefighters Museum in Winnenden. They had no record of such a fire. We tried the asylum next. It still exists, and it's still a mental hospital. They too knew nothing about a great fire, but they told us that all the patient files from the 19th century were in an archive in Ludwigsburg, and we could go there and look at them. That proved to be another gold mine of information. Not only did we find out that Lang's son died by suicide, self-immolation, hence the Great Fire story, but we also realized that Lang was never told exactly how he died and had in fact been given all kinds of information that was not supported by the autopsy report. Her son's patient file also contained several letters from Lang to the doctor who was treating her son, something we hadn't been expecting. Those kinds of surprises are always wonderful in this kind of research.
And here's one last city that became very important for our work, Vienna. When Imogen Fellinger, Lang's great-great-granddaughter and last descendant, passed away in 2001, we were informed that she had willed all of her musical documents to an archive in Vienna, the archive of the Society of the Friends of Music, Gesellschaft der Musikfreunde. So we spent a lot of time in Vienna in the early 2000s. It turned out that Imogen Fellinger had owned a huge amount of Lang-related material, letters, concert programs, pictures, and of course, published scores and manuscripts.
Among the many musical manuscripts were arrangements of two of Lang's early unpublished songs made by Felix Mendelssohn. We knew that Mendelssohn had done these transcriptions, but had never seen the manuscripts. The archive very kindly let us have copies of these songs so that they could be performed at another conference at my university. So we can't show you the Mendelssohn Originals, again, for copyright reasons. These are our transcriptions. Sharon put in a lot of work on that. So as you listen to a snippet from one of these, remember that Lang originally wrote the song for voice and piano, like the others that you've heard so far. It was Mendelssohn who changed the music to men's chorus and brass instruments. These are appropriate forces for a hunting song.
Although I'm not sure, the text doesn't sound much like a hunting song, as you'll see. Another amazing treasure in Vienna was Lang's scrapbooks, into which she pasted letters, drawings, etc., from famous people whom she'd met. One of these scrapbooks had an elaborate cover with embroidery done by her daughter Maria and portraits of her family. The cover of our book and the accompanying CD reproduces part of that scrapbook cover.
So now let's go back to the third quiz. Those of you who picked the Firefighters Museum have realized by now that that wasn't the right answer. We did consult that source. So it was the Catholic Church in Tübingen that we didn't consult. As we prepared this quiz question, we thought, maybe we should remedy that omission and visit that church at some point. After all, Lang did compose an Ave Maria for that church. So there is a connection. Always more research to do.
So what's happened since the book? As we mentioned, the book came out in 2007, but Josephine Lang is ever present in our lives. We take every opportunity to bring her before a wider public, as we are very happily doing now. And we're delighted to tell you that in addition to the plaque on Lang's house in Tübingen, there are now 2 streets named after her. Josephine Lang Weg in Munich and Josephine Lang Straße in Tübingen. Our friend Elke was so kind as to visit Josephine Lang Weg in München and have her photo taken under the sign. And we've never seen the street in Tübingen. It's kind of on the outskirts, but here's a photo of it from the internet.
So now we'd like to tell you about some of our Lang projects since the book came out. My first post-book project was editing a volume of Lang songs, consisting of all of her settings of her husband's poetry. This was published in 2008. Recently, we came across a new recording of one of the pieces in the volume. We know that it was from my edition because it is a song that had never been published before. We'd like you to hear a sample from this recording. The singer is a countertenor, a very high male voice.
Okay. Hope we don't get an ad.
Wenn das Herz dir ist beklommen und ins Auge Tränen kommen, weiß nicht, was dir werden soll, weiß nicht, was dir werden soll. Wenn kein Antlitz dir erscheinet, es ist reinig mit der meinet, und dein Auge fällt zu Fall, und dein Auge wird zu Fall.
Amazing. Amazing.
Oops, my new share didn't work. Just a sec. I've got to go back to here. There. Oh dear. Okay, something happened here. I lost my, just a sec. I'll get this figured out.
Quick review of what you've seen.
Yeah. There won't be another quiz though, so you don't have to worry. Okay. This might not be right. Oh, I think we're okay actually. Okay. My first post-book project was an invited contribution to a journal called Signature. I was asked to write something about Josephine Lang. At first, I had no idea what more I could say. But then I looked at the journal's subtitle, Women in Music, and decided to write about Lang's songs based on poems by women. After all, women can be in music when someone sets their poetry. Josephine Lang probably used more women poets' texts than any other 19th century composer. It was really fun to write this article, to look at Lang's output through a new lens. And I'm still working on getting the unpublished songs I wrote about into a more usable form. So making them go from this to this. There was one particularly beautiful unpublished song that I had already completed when the wonderful mezzo Catriona Morrison wrote to us asking about Lang's songs for her debut CD. Catriona not only did the world premiere recording of this song, she also used the first line of the English translation as the title of her CD. So here is a trailer for her CD, and you can hear her singing this song in the background. Where is it? No, here.
Die dunkle Nacht ist nun entschwunden.
title of the CD, The Dark Night Has Vanished, is taken from the first line of Josephine Lang's song Gestern und Heute. This is a special song for me as it's unpublished, and it's a huge honour to be the first singer to be able to perform this music. I stumbled across Josephine Lang quite by accident and was in disbelief that I didn't know who she was. How could it be that this incredible music is not more well known? It's important to shine a light on the brilliant works by female composers of the past and the present. What better way to do that than to allow Josephine Lang's music to stand alongside her male contemporaries and the heavyweights of the Romantic period?
We're so grateful that wonderful singers like Catriona are performing Josephine Lang. It's just so wonderful. In 2011, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a conference on songs by women composers at the National University of Ireland. So naturally, I did a presentation on Josephine Lang. 4 years later, the same university invited me to be one of two keynote speakers at a conference on the European Salon. This is not a topic on which I am an expert, and I was going to decline. But then the other keynote speaker persuaded me to talk about Josephine Lang's experiences in the Salon. That struck me as doable, and I did accept. I spent much of a study leave getting up to speed on current research on the Salon and on researching the salons in which Josephine Lang performed. These are southern German salons, which nobody had worked on. So I very much enjoyed doing this research and also doing the presentation at the Salon conference in Ireland.
We will conclude this presentation by telling you about one of our current Josephine Lang projects. In 2017, we heard a fabulous saxophone quartet, 4 of Harald's students, pictured here with UVic's chancellor. They performed an arrangement of a song by Felix Mendelssohn. They did it so beautifully that I immediately said to Harald, we've got to arrange a Josephine Lang song for them. We did that, and they loved it and asked for more. We have completed 6 arrangements by now, and a publisher in Germany is interested, so we're hoping that they're going to come out soon. Here is the very first arrangement that we did. The song is called In weite Ferne, Into the Far Distance. And in the photo you'll see in the next slide, they are playing this very song at a graduation ceremony at the University of Victoria.
Isn't that beautiful? The music is beautiful, and I'm also so proud of our students at UVic. They do such a wonderful job. So that concludes our presentation, and I hope it came through what good times we have had with Josephine Lang and continue to have in her company. So there are a few minutes for questions, and we'd be very happy to take some questions now.
Now I've got to get back to Zoom now. And you don't have to put them in the chat. I think there we go. You don't have to put them in the chat because we can do them live.
Can you listen to me?
Yes.
Well, hello from Spain.
Hello.
Thank you for your book. I discovered Josephine Lang, and I tried to find scores. I found them. I found a book in a library in the center of the USA, and that book that I have at home with 30 Josephine Lang songs, it came from a Brooklyn library that had rejected it because nobody used it.
Oh.
And this book I have here was sent to a kind of NGO that sent books for education in the third world, something like that. So thank you to internet that I could buy this book. And it contains wonderful music. The problem, well, let's say the problem is that I perform in concert the winter, for example, the winter. I love this song. It has been an incredible success every time I have performed it in courses, in university. Everybody asked me for the score because nobody knew Josephine Lang. That has been for me wonderful. Every time I perform this song, but who is this composer? This wonderful song? And they ask always for the score in Vicenza, in Italy, in France. So people is now singing it because I presented it. But I ask you, it will be very interesting. It's a suggestion, because I found that a lot of the Josephine Lang songs are middle, low voice. Let's say not very high, a lot of them. And it will be nice to have transcriptions or maybe an edition of songs for tenor and soprano. That fitted better for the high voice, because some of them I tried always with the Sibelius to put it a little higher. So because it's quite some of them that are very, very beautiful.
Well, Josephine Lang had a letter from Franz Hauser, and he actually titled it. He said, "Why are you writing such difficult music? It's too low, it's too high, it has low and high in the same song." And he said to her, "I only know of one other person who could sing it besides you, and that's Jenny Lind." So even if you transposed it, it would then be too high, because she often has songs that start really low, go really high.
The Victor, for example, goes wow.
Yeah, it does.
But there's a kind of Nana, a mother song for a child. I don't remember the name. And the song in the lullaby in Stürmischer Weather, for example, is a wonderful song, and it's too low.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to sing some of this song if we the high voices could have another edition, perhaps. Well, it's a suggestion, an idea.
Yeah. I noticed Albert has a question. Albert, do you want to ask your question so everyone could hear it?
Sorry?
Albert Watts had a question. Did he leave, or did he just write it in the chat? Let's see if I can find it. Is Lang not as well known because of the genre she composed in, say, as opposed to Clara Schumann and Fanny Mendelssohn?
Actually, the song genre was extremely popular in the 19th century, and it still is. But lots of songs were published and sold and performed in houses as opposed to concert stages. So I would say the genre is not a problem in terms of popularity. It's true that both Clara Schumann and Fanny Mendelssohn composed more in other genres. Lang did compose piano music as well, and a few choral works. But in our research, we have really focused on the songs.
The other thing, and I think I'm going to write a paper about this sometime, is Clara Schumann was married to a famous male composer. Fanny was the sister of a famous male composer. And it does seem that you need this male connection to be rediscovered. It's been a bit of a haul with Josephine Lang because she wasn't connected with any, well, she was connected to Mendelssohn, but she wasn't married to a famous man. And so we've had to kind of haul her out of nothing.
Here comes my question.
Okay.
Maybe I ask Catriona to ask questions. So she raised her hand.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh,
hi, Catriona. So nice to meet you in person.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. It's been fascinating and just fantastic to see you and hear you. I'm wondering now what the next step is to get Josephine Lang's music into more music colleges so that students are able to pick up her music and take that with them throughout their career. What is the process involved? It must be huge and difficult.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we did during the pandemic is put all of her published works on IMSLP, IMSLP, which is a website that has published music through the ages. It's an amazing resource. So actually, a large number of her songs is now available online. Of course, it would be wonderful to have modern critical editions of all of her songs. And I have repeatedly been asked to do that. But as we mentioned, I did one volume and I realized how much work this is. Please never take musical scores for granted. Somebody put years of work into it. And I just felt I can't do this for all of her songs. It would be all consuming. I would have no time for anything else.
Yeah, that's a monumental.
I can't do it. I can't.
Yeah.
So I hope somebody will do it though. I've done one big volume, so now somebody else should do some more big volumes and get those songs out there in a really superb edition. The editions that we've posted on IMSLIT, the first editions, do have a lot of errors in them, but still they're perfectly usable. And I hope performers will start using those too.
I think
very much hope so as well.
I think they have. There's a project, another pandemic project that came out of Boston, where people were recording stuff that I think they got from the recently posted IMSLIT scores. So they did, I think, 3 songs. They did the one with cello that was at the beginning of this, and the other one from that opus with cello. They did one of Lang's Köstling settings, and they did 2 of her piano pieces. So I'm hoping. I think, Catriona, your CD actually is going to do a lot, not only because it's so wonderful, but also because people might pick it up to listen to Schumann and then go, oh, Josephine Lang's really great. So I think it's gonna affect a lot of people. So I hope I'm really grateful you did that, and we love it.
Congratulations again. And I've really been amazed at how the reviewers have latched on to Josephine Lang. They listen to your CD and they're just blown away by Lang's songs. So,
yeah, it was a pleasure to do it, and yeah, that's part of the reason I asked, because there's been so much publicity, I guess, now for Josephine Lang through that. Which I had never even hoped for, but it's been fantastic. And yeah, I guess part of it is just spreading the word and getting her name known, and knowing that the songs are now available on the internet for a start anyway, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much for uploading all of that.
Well, thank you. The CD is truly amazing. We recommend it to everybody.
Very kind.
So Minji, you had a question?
Yeah, my question is really about your journey. When we were preparing for the talk, I understood from your narrative that you spent more than 30 years researching relatively less known female composer. I have two questions. Number one is why? Number two is, during the 30-year journey, is there anything unexpected? Was there anything surprising coming up?
Well, we mentioned a couple of the surprises, things that we really didn't expect, that we suddenly came across, and wow, look at this. There are lots of surprises all the time. You just can't predict where the research will take you. We didn't expect that we'd have to consult a fireman's museum. Didn't even know that it would exist. And it's amazing that it existed in the very town where this supposed great fire had taken place. I mean, these are amazing coincidences. But to answer the first part of your question, why did we spend so much time on this composer? It was just because we realized right from the start that this is music that is absolutely amazing and worth spending time on and worth introducing to other people. So we've continued to do that. We really feel it's our mission.
Barbara has a question in the chat box.
Do German scholars read your book?
Yeah, I think so. I have to say, looking at our royalty statements, not very many people read our book at all, German or English or anything. I'm really amazed still that Oxford University Press took this on, and will be eternally grateful to them for going out on a limb. They sure haven't made much money on it. But we do think it's a good book, and people who read it do enjoy it. We really tried to make it accessible and enjoyable. Thank you so much, Jose, for having the book. But I think German scholars generally do read English very well. We're always amazed when we participate in German conferences and talk to the other scholars, how well they know English. Not that we speak English to them, but it's amazing. I think Europeans in general are just very much better at learning other languages than North American scholars.
And we have each published 2 articles on Josephine Lang in German. So if they only read German, at least they'll kind of get the get to know our name, and maybe they'll look up the English book.
Yeah. And we do give German presentations on Josephine Lang. So we do try to do that in Germany, get her name out there too.
Right. Sharon is you're going to put the title of your book in the chat,
yeah.
Right?
There it is.
Josephine Lang, her life and songs.
So if you put our names in and that, you should get it.
Yeah. So your name is eternally connected with the name of Josephine. Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Harald and Sharon, for a wonderful journey yourself, spending so much time revealing and uncovering the life and the music of Josephine Lang, and sharing, offering your generous time with us for our first Pacific time-friendly cultural storytelling. We absolutely loved it, and so many people are putting words saying how awesome your story is, your journey is, and how great this talk is. It's definitely the highlight of my week, considering it will be my first German lesson today. So thank you very much, people in the group. And we do organize these free weekly events to encourage people sharing lifestyles from their culture. And we purposely made it free because culture should be accessible to anyone, regardless of his or her background. If you would like to check previous talks and events or the fascinating subjects from around the world, feel free to check our website, or you can join our Facebook group. I will put Facebook group exploreculture.net in the chat box. Now I am going to invite Ploy in the group. Ploy, understand you are curating something for our next Pacific time-friendly event inspired by today. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, on the 4th of July, it's actually our Independence Day in America. We are collaborating with the Disney Animation Studio that we are gonna talk about the Southeast Asian food through the Disney recent movie, Raya and the Last Dragon. And we are working on the content, and we will have the head of the story from the Disney Animation Studio who come and talk about the inspirations, motivations, and the story behind the movie, why they are doing the Southeast Asian movie, and the inspiration behind the food, because the food brings people together. In addition to that, we are inviting food experts from Southeast Asian countries to talk about those food that shown on the movie. So if you're interested, on the 4th of July at the same time as today, we will talk about the Southeast Asian food through the Raya and the Last Dragon Disney movie.
Great. Thank you very much for everybody who attend our session today. Really great appreciation to Dr. Harald and Sharon. And your passion shines through the presentation. And we are very touched when we heard even 5 a.m. in the morning, you would have done it. So my name is Mingji. I'm based in London, UK. Working with Ploy, who's based in Boston, USA. We try to curate different culture, food related talks to let us sharing culture for the people and about the people. So thank you very much again for coming. We will see you for our next event. Bye.
Bye.